Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to introduce you to Tmux or Terminal Multiplexer, which is a tool that allows you to get multiple panes or windows in your terminal emulator. So like here I've got four different windows. If I move my webcam, you can see over here there's another one. So it allows you to have either multiple connections to a server or connections to multiple servers, or you split up your window in different ways so that you can access and run different programs from within the same terminal. And the idea here is if you say you want to connect to a server to do some administration, maybe you're editing a bunch of different files and you're running a server and so on and so forth. Tmux really helps with that. So I use Tmux every day. It's one of my favorite tools. And I'm just going to introduce you to how you can use it. So right now I've got a sort of window with up here, I've got HTOP running, and over here I just installed a fun program called SL. This is like a kind of punk yourself if you accidentally type SL instead of LS. It'll make this steam engine run by. Idea is like it'll force you to be a bit more precise with your typing. And then down here in the bottom left, I have Vim running. And anyway, the point is I've got the windows split up so I can run different things on the same screen. And what I can do is I can open another window here, and now I have a full other session that I can split up in the same way, and I can do whatever I like in here, and so on. So if, let's say I wanted to connect to a server here, now on the left side, I'll be connected to this server that I'm using to work through this course with, which you can see in the description. On the right, I've got HTOP running again. And so on the left, I'm on a remote machine, and on the right, I'm on a local machine. So that's cool. I'll explain how to do these various things in a second. But what's extra cool is this Tmux session is running on my local computer. But what I can do on the left pane where I'm running a remote machine is I can run Tmux here as well. And so now I can have the same sort of thing where I have multiple things running in a pane, but on the server. So for example, if I were to split this up, now I've got two windows here, or I could do it like this. Now I've got three windows on my remote machine, and this one on the left, or sorry, on the right is my local machine. And so what I'm doing here is I'm running Tmux on my local machine, and that's the orange bar on the bottom, which I'll talk about in just a second. And the green bar is the status bar for the remote machine. So if I move this out of the way a little bit, you can see the green bar only goes halfway across the screen because that's the remote machine. I'll make this a little bit bigger to talk about it, or a lot bigger, I guess. But here we have the name of the session, which here is called Charlie. And this one is called 0. I've got a little script set up so that when I open Tmux on my local machine, it gives it a name. So Charlie. So for example, if I do this, if I say Tmux list sessions, I can see this is a session here. And if I open a new one, now I have Zulu. So I'm just using the phonetic alphabet. And if I run that list sessions command again, you can see I've got these two different sessions. So the point being, this just helps me keep track of which session I'm running. So I'll come back to how to name these sessions in a second after I've walked through some of the basic key bindings. So that's what we'll do next. We'll talk about how to split up your windows, create new windows, different panes, and that kind of thing. Okay, so we're back in this view. I'm going to shrink this webcam a little bit. And the first thing to know is that in order to send a command to Tmux, there's something called a leader key. So by default, that's Ctrl-b. So if I press Ctrl-b and then some other command, it'll send that command to Tmux to either split the window, create a new window, whatever the case may be. So for this tutorial, I'm going to turn on a tool called Screen Key, which will show you what I'm pressing on the screen, just so you can follow along. I'll talk about it also, but it might help to be able to see it. So here, if I open up a new window and turn on Screen Key, now you can see whatever I'm pressing here, right? So I'm just going to leave this window alone, this pane. And now you can see here, I'm pressing Control plus, this is the symbol for space in Screen Key. So I'm pressing Control space. So that's my leader key on my home setup. Whereas if I'm in the remote machine here, the default is Ctrl-b. So if I press Ctrl-b and then something, then it will do whatever on this other machine here. So Ctrl-b and then, for example, double quotes, we see here, that will split the screen horizontally. Whereas if I want to split it vertically, I would press Ctrl-b and then the percent sign. So Ctrl-b and double quotes splits it horizontally. Ctrl-b and percent sign splits it vertically. So that's super useful. Control-b, or whatever your leader key is, for my home machine here, it's Control space. I would press Control space and then O, and it will switch me over here to the right side. Now I can quit out of this program, which is htop, by pressing Q, and then I can close this pane. And now I don't have a local pane here in this particular window. And just to clarify, the individual like subsquares, we'll call those panes. And then if I make a new window, that's like a whole screen. We can close that one. Now here on the remote machine, we look down here. This is the status bar in green for this remote machine. It's got the name of the session first. Then it's got the window ID, which is 0, and then the program that it's running. And so in all three windows, starting at 0 and then 1 and 2, we're running bash, which is just our shell. And then this asterisk down at the bottom is showing us which of these three windows is open. So you can see in this window 2, which is the third one in the list down here, we've got this layout with a top and then 2 on the bottom. If I press leader key N, I'll go to the next one. And so now we're over here. And this has this layout with 1 on the left and 3 on the right. And you can see the asterisk has moved down here. And I can press Ctrl-b N to go to the next one, which is number 1. It just has one single screen. And I can go in the other direction by pressing leader key and then P for previous. So next or previous, you can see at the bottom, I'm going back and forth between 0 and 1. That's one way to do it. Alternatively, you can press leader key and then the number of the window. So if I press Ctrl-b and then 2, it takes me straight to window number 2. Now within a window, you want to switch between your panes. The simplest way is to press Ctrl-b and then O, and that will just cycle to the next one. So I can just, you can see my cursor here moving around. As I press Ctrl-b O, it goes to the next pane in the window. And then you can also use the arrow keys to move around. So you could press leader key and then up to go up, or leader key and then down, and so on and so forth. I usually just find myself pressing Ctrl-b and then O a bunch of times, but depends on what you're doing. If you have 6 or 8 panes on an ultra wide screen, it generally is a good idea to use the arrow keys. So that's how you move around your splits and your windows. If you want to create a new window, you would press leader key and then C, and this will open up a new window. Now you can see at the bottom we have a number 3, our 4th window, and it's selected. And then we can just exit out of this window. Just like any other shell, we type exit and it goes away. And then we're back to 3. And then another thing you can do in Tmux is there are 5 pre-built layouts. So if you press leader key and then hold Alt and press 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So if I press Alt 1, I'll get this first layout, which is equally spaced vertical windows. Or if I press leader key and then Alt 2, it's the same but with horizontal splits. If I press leader key and then Alt 3, I get this, which is a horizontal split with a big window on top and 2 small ones, or however many small ones on the bottom. Leader key Alt 4 gives you this, so your main window on the left, and then horizontally split ones on the right. And then the last one, if I press leader key Alt 5, I think what this does is try to tile equal windows all over the terminal. And so in this case, we only have 3, so the last one gets more space. But if we made a bunch of splits like this, we can split this as many times as we want until there's no room. So if you can see that warning at the bottom, it says no space for new pane. But, of course, we could switch to this one and then start splitting it vertically. So now we have all kinds of windows, and they're not all that usable. But if we use the 5th layout, if we press Ctrl-b and then Alt 5, it'll try to split them all up equally. And so this can help you if you have a whole bunch of windows open, right? And then if you want to resize these panes, you can press leader key and then hold the Control key down and use the arrows, and you can change the size of the windows. So that's a basic overview of how to create splits or panes in different windows and move them around and organize them and that kind of thing. Now I'll just talk about a couple more things you can do to make Tmux a bit easier to use. As I mentioned at the beginning, I've got these 2 different status bars at the bottom, the orange one and the green one. And so the orange one represents my home computer, as I said. And so I can move around different terminal windows within my own local machine. And one of those, let's say, could be a connection to this server. And another one could be a connection to a different server, or for some reason, maybe a separate connection to the same server. But when you're doing this, when you have lots of windows, maybe lots of connections open, it helps to be able to rename the connection or to do things like change the status bar color so you can see. And in this particular setup, it's quite important that I have 2 different leader keys, because if I need to interact with Tmux on my local computer, I need the leader key to be distinct from the leader key setup on the remote machine, or the computer won't know where to send the command, right? If they were both Control-b, then when I press Ctrl-b, the computer doesn't know if that should go to the remote machine or my local machine. So the way that you do that is by modifying your config file, which I'll bring up in just a second. And that's also the way that you modify the color and the layout and that kind of thing. So you can see here, I just have this 0, whereas down here I have a name called Charlie. And then similar to that, for each individual window within a specific session, you've got a name. And so by default, it just tells you the name of the program that's running. So in this case, if we were to open the program top, let's say, you can see down here that it's telling us what program is running in the pane that we're currently in. And if we move out of this pane and let's say open Vim, now it shows Vim down here, right? And if we go over here and open htop, same idea. This will change to htop. And so, so at the level of the individual pane, you get a name. And then at the level of the session, you can change the name. And you can set these both manually. So if I want to set, let's say I'm up here. What I'm going to do first actually is get rid of a bunch of these windows just to simplify our view. Okay, and now we've just got 4 windows here. And one thing I'll say actually that is helpful is if you press Ctrl-b and hold down Control, or press leader key and hold down Control, and you press O, then your windows will move around. They'll cycle around. And so this is a nice way to sort of rearrange windows if they're not in the place that you'd like them to be. Okay, and now we'll go back to changing the names of your windows in your sessions. So down here, we're in an SSH connection on the local machine to our server. And then in our server, we're in this pane, which is just bash. It's just our shell. So let's say we open Vim. Now it shows Vim. So what I could do is I can change this SSH name here to say dev server, right? So the way that we would do that is you press leader key and then comma. So if I press, this is on my local machine, so my leader key is Control space here. I press leader key, Control space, and then comma, and now it says rename window. And instead of SSH, I might want to call it dev server, just so I know what I'm doing, right? And so now this changes to dev server, right? So you might be connected to a dev server and a production server, or a dev server and some database or whatever. And one other thing I'll say is I've configured my status bar down here for the text to be white for the active window, just to make it a bit easier to see. So that's another small nicety. And then if I want to change the name of the session as a whole, I might, so this Charlie in this case, I can press leader key and then $sign. So it would be Control space and then $sign. And you see you get this rename session. And instead of Charlie, I could call it YT tutorial. So you see now the session is down here as YT tutorial. And so that can be helpful for a few different reasons. One of the cool things about Tmux is I can detach from this terminal and come back to it later. So let's say I want to do some other work and I just want to put this away. I can press leader key and D for detach, and then now it's gone. So now I'm just back to a regular old terminal. I can open whatever program, And now if I type Tmux list sessions, we can see there's that session that we had before, and we can say Tmux attach, and then you would say -T for target or -- target. And you can give it the name of the session, or you can give it the first few letters. And when you press enter, then you're reconnected to your session. Now on a local machine, this might not seem super obviously useful because you could just minimize the window or move it or something. But if you're on a remote machine like we are here, it becomes super useful because if we want to disconnect from our server but keep all of these things running, say we have a text editor and a server and a database and a htop to monitor the system. Say we have a session set up that we want to keep, we can just detach from the session. So I press Ctrl-b and then D to detach from it, and then log out of the server. If we log back into that server later, I'll just wait till this goes away. So here we're going to reconnect to that server, and now we're just in a regular shell, but we can reattach to that Tmux session in the same way. So if we list our session here, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. So if we run that same Tmux list sessions command again, this is kind of in the way, but in a second you'll see the name of our session here is 0 with the 3 windows. Now we can say Tmux attach and then -T 0, our target is 0, and now we're back in that same session that we had before. So that allows us to keep things running. Like let's say we're running a server. Let's say it's a Fast API or a Flask or a Node Express server. We can have that running inside Tmux, detach from our Tmux session and log out, and that server will continue to run, which is a nice way to do it if you're running a development server, because you might want to get in and out of the server without killing the server process, but you don't have to run it in the background where you can't see, say, the logs or the activity that's coming through in the server. So it's a nice option to keep things sort of in the background that you can reattach to later. Okay, and then the last thing I'll talk about is how to change this status bar stuff. So I mentioned I changed my leader key and sort of the visualization of the status bar on my local computer. So if I open up the Tmux config on my local machine, here we have, it's just a text file. And you can see down here, it's saved at the home directory and then .tmux.conf or config like this. And then you have various different options you can set. So you can, these first ones you can sort of ignore, but the main ones that we've talked about here is the status background. So here I've set the color to 3. Now this is a function of my Linux environment. Your system will be different almost certainly. So don't pay too much attention to the details. But the idea is we've got a background for the status and a foreground. So whatever color the text is, this foreground is white here. You can see my terminal is highlighting it in white to show us. And then the other main thing is this prefix key. So I've been calling it a leader key because that's what it's called in Vim, and that's how I think about it. But same idea. The prefix is the thing that you press before pressing the command. So capital C dash space is short for control space. So if I wanted to change this to Control A, which a lot of people like to do, or Control comma, that would go here. And so just by changing this, I can have nested Tmux sessions that don't get confused. So that's basically it. That's a quick overview of why you might want to use Tmux and some basics about how to set up windows and panes and change things around, configure it the way you like it. Tmux is super configurable, super customizable, like a lot of other Linux command line programs, like Vim, for example. So you can play with this to your heart's content to get it just the way you like it. But out of the box, it's super powerful. You only have to learn a handful of commands to be able to use it effectively. And I found that it's been a huge help for my productivity and workflow. It helps me manage servers and development environments and things all the time. I hope you got something out of this. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And thanks for watching.